Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media on this Monday, March 14th, 2022. If you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. A map will come up of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left. It's a point-and-click map. You can click on there and get the weather forecast, any watches, warnings, or advisories for anywhere in the country. It's a good way to check up on what the weather is like in places where friends and relatives live. There's also plenty of other information once you poke around there. Well, let's take a look at what we have here in the headlines. I'm going to recap the recent aurora display. Those of you who saw it early Sunday morning, good for you. You were lucky because by the time things rolled around Sunday night, it had quieted down. So what we're watching out here for the weather in the upcoming week, there's going to be some more rain and snow across the Panhandle into the Gulf Coast. There'll be a few different weather systems now into Wednesday. It may enhance some avalanche threats, especially near the areas around Cordova, Turnagain, and Thompson Passes. But overall, colder, drier air is settling in through the mainland, lending toward clearer skies, especially focused, centered on the southwest portion of the state here this week and through the upcoming weekend into early next week. Well, there was quite an aurora display late Saturday night into early Sunday morning, right at the time of the time change. And I wanted to show you an image Caitlin, one of the forecasters up at Fairbanks, shared with me in one of their social media posts. Late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, the Adigan Pass web camera there for the highway, the Dalton Highway, showed, you could see a little hint at the aurora. It's a little kind of fuzzy shot there, but the fact it's showing up in a webcam, that's a good sign if you're looking for something to potentially be brighter. After 2 a.m., things began to progress, and as we got the full bulk of the coronal mass ejection, the sky exploded over Nome. The aurora was directly overhead where John Dean captured these images from Nome in the pre-dawn sky of early Sunday morning. In fact, I had coworkers at the Anchorage office who saw the northern lights in Anchorage, in downtown there, coming into work early Sunday morning. And this is the way, this is kind of a graph of the what we call KP index, the disturbance there of the Earth's magnetic field. And the areas 4 bars in red, which were from 5 to 6 there, happened during the midday, early morning there of Sunday, March 13th. And then, of course, it trailed off yesterday afternoon, evening. Now, the image on your right shows where the aurora forecast, where it was most intense yesterday afternoon at this time. And you can see it was out over Greenland, North Atlantic, and it was going to, as the Earth rotated, if things stayed the same, Alaska would have had another chance at seeing a pretty bright aurora on Sunday evening, but that was not the case because by then the solar disturbance had settled down, allowing the geomagnetic storm to subside. So what do we have for hazardous weather? We do have a wind chill advisory in effect from 10 p.m. this evening through noon Tuesday for areas of the eastern Brooks Range, including the eastern North Slope. Wind chills could be as cold as 55 below zero, kind of behind a backdoor cold front that's going to press further south and westward down toward the southwest part of the state. Also there you can see down toward the bottom, Yakutat area, and the northern end of the Panhandle, including Haines and Skagway, are under weather advisories now into 6 a.m. Expect 2 to 4 inches of snow around Yakutat with the potential for some freezing rain mixing in here, maybe as much as 1/10 of an inch in icing overnight into early morning. The areas up around White Pass and including Skagway and Haines could see as much as 3 to 7 inches of snowfall tonight into early Tuesday morning. Otherwise, satellite, or I should say the webcam images, Anaktuvuk Pass this afternoon had some lower cloudiness in there along with some flurries and a temperature of 3 below as that colder air advances southward. McKinley or Denali South camera showed clear skies, a beautiful view of the central Alaska range. And then dropping further south, Seward on the Kenai Peninsula was enjoying mostly sunny skies. Temperature there was still above freezing today. And Sitka had overcast skies with some light rain and a temperature of 44. The rains will be increasing overnight there in the vicinity of Sitka, continuing through the day on Tuesday. We can see that comma-shaped or that circular cloud circulation lifting out of the North Pacific up into the southern southeastern part of the Gulf. That's heading up toward the Panhandle and will bring gale force front into that area tonight into tomorrow, along with additional precipitation. As I highlighted, some snow that'll mix with a little freezing rain around Yakutat, and mainly snow further up as you get into the colder air that resides in the northern portion of the Panhandle. Otherwise, much of the interior is enjoying clear skies. There are some clouds, snow showers moving into the north slope, especially the western areas of that, and there's still showers lingering along the Aleutian chain with a weak low pressure trough there. So here is the surface weather map this Monday afternoon. We have the low down in the Gulf. We have the backdoor cold front that's dropping southwestward across the state, currently getting to about the Yukon River and the Seward Peninsula. And then as we get into early on Tuesday morning, we will see that front continue to press southward to the Alaska Range and to the lower Yukon Delta. Meanwhile, the low is lifting northward up into the Gulf and weakening, but it's going to bring that precipitation up throughout the Panhandle and especially along the northern Gulf Coast. Meanwhile, another low south of the Alaska Peninsula and the North Pacific is going to lift northeastward and kind of combine with the remnants of the other low in the Gulf. And by the time we get into Tuesday, well, I should say here's Monday afternoon, you can see there's the one low weakening up there toward the central Gulf Coast, and then we have another low south of the Alaska Peninsula, and by Wednesday it's just kind of a weaker combination that's going to keep some better snowfall going around Prince William Sound, the eastern Kenai. That's why there's a potential and enhanced risk for some avalanches to occur here this midweek with additional snowfall that falls there in the higher elevations. Otherwise, weak high pressure will be in charge there across the north slope into northwest Canada. So low temperatures Tuesday morning, relatively mild, lower 40s there along the outer Panhandle coast. Colder in the south central interior, 13 below Glen Allen, 14 below over at McGrath. And then daytime highs Tuesday afternoon will stay below freezing inland areas. Still, though, along the coast with some cloud cover and a little surge of milder air. See 40s in the Panhandle, mid 30s along the Kenai coast, Whittier down towards Seward and Homer, 40-ish at Kodiak, and then Wednesday morning with cloud cover, not quite as cold in the south central interior. But certainly temperatures are not going to be as mild as they were, but they should get back up above freezing, even up toward Anchorage, up through Talkeetna, and definitely low mid 40s common across much of the Panhandle. In the north, the colder temperatures are in place. Teens, 20s below. Some of the normally cold spots could be 30s below. Arctic Village this Monday morning had the state's low temperature at 32 below. And as we go into the day on Tuesday, we'll see single digits highs along the Yukon, middle and lower Yukon River, generally below zero north slope and Arctic coast. Wednesday morning lows again down in the teens and 20s below. There could be an isolated 30-degree below reading there. And then as we go into Wednesday afternoon, temperatures generally 5 to 10 above, maybe slightly warmer along the Yukon River, but still below zero north slope and Arctic coast. And extending out through the southwest, we see morning lows below zero with clear skies. As you go up the Kuskokwim and the Yukon Basin, you're going to see colder temperatures along the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, temperatures near or a bit above freezing. Afternoon highs still above freezing there across the Aleutians, at least on up through the first half of the Alaska Peninsula. Daytime highs, though, only in the single digits there as you go up the Yukon and Kuskokwim basins, including places like Aniak on up toward McGrath. And then Wednesday morning lows, again, could be a bit below zero there across the southwest interior. Little colder, though, across the Alaska Peninsula, where we expect an enhancement of snow showers with more of a northerly flow. We expect some gap winds there down through the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, especially later Tuesday into Wednesday as the cold front presses southward. And then daytime highs should get back up in the lower teens in the southwest interior and only near freezing as you get out toward the eastern Aleutians. Still looks like temperatures are going to average below normal, centered on the southwest, March 20th through the 24th, so that takes us into early next week. A little above normal temperatures there in the Panhandle, especially in the south, and then below normal precipitation anticipated the west side of the state, but averaging a little bit above normal there for its southeast interior, extending down through the length of the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's time now for your aviation weather, and if you have a flight planned Tuesday into Wednesday, the main weather features will be Low pressure in the Gulf. We have one low pressure system Tuesday morning that'll be off of the Panhandle coast. That'll slowly lift northwestward toward the central Gulf coast by later Tuesday into Wednesday morning. And meanwhile, we'll be watching another low coming up south of the Alaska Peninsula. That'll be lifting up toward Kodiak Island and eventually merging with some colder air. There's a backdoor cold front Tuesday morning. They'll be along the Alaska Range into the YK Delta in the southwest part of the state. That colder air will continue sinking south and southwestward and then merge up with that other low. Meanwhile, weak high pressure ridge will continue across northern parts of the state into northwest Canada. In the wake of that cold front passage, though, Tuesday morning in the north, we expect areas of IFR conditions, north slope out over the Chukchi Sea off the northwest coast, where there will be areas of blowing snow as well as a stronger northerly wind gradient sets up on the backside of this system. And widespread IFR conditions Tuesday morning into Tuesday afternoon across the Panhandle on up into the north central Gulf Coast, and also along and into the Pacific side there of the Alaska Peninsula, far eastern Aleutians. By Wednesday morning, we still see some pockets of IFR, east central areas, Yukon Flats, down just south of the Alaska Range, also lingering up there along the northwest coast, and the intercoastal mountains of the inner channels of the Panhandle, around Yakutat, Prince William Sound southwestward, down through Kodiak Island. And for Wednesday afternoon, IFR conditions continue from the mouth of Cook Inlet along the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, extending into portions of the Panhandle. And past conditions on Tuesday, Anaktuvuk will see MVFR conditions generally become VFR, but the further north you fly up into the north slope, you're going to run into MVFR and IFR conditions. Adigan Pass, the same thing, MVFR conditions Tuesday morning becoming VFR, but the further north you fly up into the north slope, you're going to run into MVFR and IFR conditions. Lake Clark and Merrill will have VFR conditions to start Tuesday morning, becoming MVFR. Some moisture creeps up from the southwest. And then on Tuesday, we expect Rainy Pass to hold on to VFR conditions. Windy Pass will see VFR conditions in the morning becoming MVFR. And as we extend further eastward along the Alaska Range, we'll see a trend toward MVFR conditions. Isabel VFR to MVFR. And Mentasta should generally see MVFR conditions throughout the day on Tuesday. Further south and west, Tanita, VFR becoming MVFR. And then at Portage Pass, VFR in the morning, especially the western half, but generally MVFR conditions are anticipated throughout the day Tuesday, especially the eastern half, east entrance into Prince William Sound. And finally, in the northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White on Tuesday will see MVFR conditions become IFR, and then IFR will dominate for Tuesday night into the day on Wednesday. Looking at freezing levels, they do creep upwards a bit to around 2,000 feet aloft there in through the outer portion of the Panhandle and then well south of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific. Otherwise, the surface freezing line runs along the outer areas of the Panhandle into the northern Gulf just off of Kodiak Island and back across the eastern Aleutians out into the lower Bering. Greatest potential for any icing will be perhaps north central Gulf down to southwestern parts of the Panhandle between 3,000 and 12,000 feet. There'll be some isolated moderate icing possible over the Aleutians between 2,000 and 10,000 feet, and then isolated moderate icing between 1,000 and 9,000 feet, the Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait. Upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet are relatively light, considering 60, 70 knot winds at best. Southwesterly there across southeast Alaska. On the backside of low pressure, we have northeasterly winds on the west side of the state to 70 knots. Coming down to 9,000 feet, we see some stronger winds on the west side of the state out of the northeast at about 45 to 50 knots. Seward Peninsula down to the YK Delta coastline there, and then 3,000 feet shows stronger winds again from the lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait down along the southwest coast into the eastern Aleutians and tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and that's where we expect the greatest threat for some turbulence. St. Lawrence surface to 3,000 feet, west and northwest areas including the Seward Peninsula surface to 4,000 feet. An area down there in the eastern Aleutians, surface to 3,000 foot turbulence, and then in the southeast, the southern part of the Panhandle, could see some turbulence surface to 6,000 feet. So if you are able to get out, check the latest forecast and have a safe flight.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the Augmented Reality Sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version.
Sweet.
Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this Sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching
Right.
tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have? You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event
Right.
on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking
kidding.
Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and checking the sea ice edge today. Across the Arctic coast, Chukchi Sea into the Bering Strait, the ice is going to generally hold in place. We don't anticipate any really strong winds, and the cold air will also be present, so it'll allow the ice to maintain. Further south, though, we continue to see generally a northerly component to the wind through midweek along the western and southwestern coast, and as a result, the ice, especially the ice edge, is going to have a tendency to want to drift a bit southward. Not especially fast, but nevertheless, that'll be the trend here into midweek. As for the panhandle for the marine forecast on Tuesday, the inner channels, central and southern, will be 15 to 25 knot south to southeast winds. Waves could be as high as 10, 11 feet there at Dixon Entrance. Otherwise, as you go up, Lynn Canal, northerly winds 15 knots, 2-foot waves, colder air there in place. And then along the outer Gulf Coast, generally westerly winds will take charge, 15 to 25 knots, highest waves running about 15, 16 feet south of Goose Davis, especially down off of Craig. And then Wednesday, we see winds from the south, east to south across the inner channels, 15 knots, Lynn Canal, few footers, but then getting down there toward Metlakatla, 30 knot southeasterly winds and waves 5, 6 feet. On the outer coast, winds will be 30 to 35 knot gales from the southeast, and waves generally 9 to maybe as high as 13 feet. Across the northwest Gulf, winds won't be quite that strong, and we anticipate variable winds 10 knots there in Prince William Sound, waves only a couple of feet. Off the Kenai Peninsula in the northwest Gulf, 15 to 20 knot southwesterly winds, 8-foot waves or so. And then as we go down through Lower Cook Inlet there at the entrance, northwest winds 25 knots, waves 5 feet. By Wednesday, low pressure is going to kind of redevelop and situate itself along the eastern Kenai Peninsula coast, and we have that counterclockwise circulation, easterly winds to 30 knots, Prince William Sound, 35 knot gales there south of Cordova, waves as high as 14 feet, and then turning more toward the north and then northwest by the time you get there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 9 feet. Across Kodiak Island on Tuesday, we're looking for winds to be out of the north through Shelikof Strait, 15 knots, becoming east-northeast along the Pacific side of the peninsula, 20 to 30 knots, and then 25 to 30 knot northeasterly winds from Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay, waves 5 to as high as 9 feet. On Wednesday, across the area, there's going to be a cold front that pushes south of the peninsula, so as a result, winds are going to turn more north to northwesterly and could be as high as 35-knot gales offshore of the peninsula on the Pacific side and generally out of the north on the Bering side. And as we go across the Aleutians, winds there will also have broadly a northerly component as high as 30-35 knots the eastern Aleutians, with waves generally 9 to 11 feet, tailing off to around 8 feet or so from the west, central and western Aleutians, and winds down just a little bit around 20 knots. By Wednesday, the eastern Aleutians will see north to northwest winds around 25 knots, though it could be as high as 35 knots south of Dutch Harbor. And then generally look for winds turning more northeasterly as you get west of Adak, and 15 to 20 knots. Along the west coast, winds will generally be out of the northwest around 25 knots over the ice, so there still could be a southward drift there to the ice. Otherwise, 30-knot north to northeast winds there, vicinity of St. Paul, with waves of 10 feet. On Wednesday, winds continue about 20 to 25 knots from Norton Sound down across the ice there north of Nunavik Island. And then as we get out there towards St. Paul, St. George, look for north-northwest winds 30 knots and waves about 9 feet. Along the Arctic coast, winds will generally be out of the west-southwest 15 knots, but once we get there into the Chukchi Sea, northwest coast, winds will be north to northwest around 20 knots, picking up to about 25 knots through the Bering Strait. And on Wednesday, winds will continue generally westerly, 20 to 25 knots there across the Arctic coast, but more out of the northwest as you ride down the northwest coast through the lower Chukchi Sea, and on the north side of Nunavik Island you can pick up to about 25 knots. Quick check of the weather map. Monday, we expect weak low pressure along the northern Gulf Coast, the next low coming up south of the Alaska Peninsula, and by the time we get to Wednesday, that low will tend to try and consolidate there south of Seward, south of the Kenai Peninsula, and some colder air working its way with some gap winds and enhanced snow showers along the Alaska Peninsula.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.